School bullies target the new kid. They had no idea. He was an MMA champion. Ethan Morgan slumped further into his seat as the school bus rattled over another pothole. At 15, he was shorter than most boys his age, with a slight frame that made him look even younger. His dark-rimmed glasses slid down his nose again, and he pushed them back up with a sigh. Today was his first day at Westlake High, and his stomach churned with anxiety. His father's job had forced them to move across the country, uprooting Ethan from the few friends he'd managed to make at his old school. Starting over in the middle of sophomore year seemed like a cruel joke. He ran his hand through his unruly brown hair, trying to tame it one last time before arrival. What his soon-to-be classmates wouldn't know, what nobody at Westlake could possibly guess, was that beneath his baggy clothes and nervous demeanor, Ethan had trained in mixed martial arts since he was 6 years old. His father, a former professional fighter-turned-coach, had insisted on it. 9 years of rigorous training had transformed Ethan's body into a lean machine of muscle and reflexes, though you'd never know it looking at him. He preferred it that way. Just keep your head down and get through the day, he reminded himself as the bus pulled up to Westlake High. The imposing 3-story brick building loomed ahead, students already streaming through its wide front doors. Ethan took a deep breath and joined the crowd. Westlake High School was known for its championship football team and state-of-the-art facilities, courtesy of generous alumni donations. Wide hallways with gleaming lockers stretched in every direction, and a massive trophy case dominated the main entrance hall. Everything about the place screamed money and prestige, making Ethan feel even more out of place in his thrift store jeans and plain t-shirt. His first encounter with trouble came before first period even began, as he studied his schedule by his newly assigned locker, trying to map out the quickest routes between classes. A shadow fell across the paper in his hands. "Well, what do we have here?" A deep voice caused Ethan to look up into the face of a boy, at least 6 inches taller than him. The boy's Letterman jacket stretched across broad shoulders, and a smirk twisted his otherwise handsome features. "I'm just trying to find my classes," Ethan said quietly, taking a step back. "Guys, check out the new meet," the boy called over, his shoulder to 2 others who were leaning against nearby lockers. "I'm Jackson. This is Westlake, and you should know that we have a welcome tradition for new kids." The 2 other boys approached. One was nearly as tall as Jackson but leaner, with a sharp face and calculating eyes. The other was built like a tank with arms that strained against his shirt sleeves. "That's Drew," Jackson nodded toward the leaner boy. "And that's Marcus." The tank nodded, cracking his knuckles for effect. Ethan felt his muscles tense instinctively, but he forced himself to maintain his unassuming posture. His father's words echoed in his mind. "Fighting is always a last resort, Ethan, always." "I don't want any trouble," Ethan said, lowering his eyes. Jackson laughed, snatching Ethan's schedule from his hands. "Hear that, boys? He doesn't want trouble." He scanned the paper. "Well, Ethan Morgan, trouble has a way of finding the fresh meat around here." Drew plucked the schedule from Jackson's hands. "Look at this. He's in AP Physics. We got ourselves a nerd, Jackson." He crumpled the paper and tossed it over his shoulder. Ethan watched his schedule bounce across the hallway floor, landing near the boots of a girl with purple-streaked hair who was watching the scene unfold with obvious discomfort. She caught his eye briefly before looking away. "See you around, fresh meat," Jackson said, bumping Ethan's shoulder hard as he passed. Marcus followed suit, deliberately stepping on Ethan's schedule as the 3 of them walked away. Ethan exhaled slowly, counting backward from 10 as his father had taught him. Control was everything. The purple-haired girl approached cautiously, retrieving his crumpled schedule. "Sorry about them," she said, handing it back. "They're the worst. I'm Zoe, by the way." "Ethan," he smoothed out the paper. "Are they always like that?" "Jackson and his crew? Yeah, pretty much. They practically run this school because Jackson's dad is on the board and donates a ton of money to the athletic department." She glanced in the direction they'd gone. "Just try to stay out of their way." That proved easier said than done. Biseo. Lunchtime, word had spread that there was fresh meat in the building, and Ethan could feel eyes on him wherever he went. In the cafeteria, he hoped to find a quiet corner where he could eat alone, but as he carried his tray across the crowded room, a foot suddenly appeared in his path. Ethan saw it coming. His training had made his spatial awareness exceptional, but he made the split-second decision to play along. He tripped, sending his tray clattering to the floor, food spraying everywhere. Laughter erupted around him. Jackson's voice rose above the din. "Oops. Sorry, fresh meat. Didn't see you there." From his position on the floor, Ethan noticed several teachers at their table, pointedly ignoring the situation. his hands balled into fists against the cold tile. Not worth it, he reminded himself, slowly gathering the scattered remains of his lunch. Zoe appeared beside him, helping him clean up. "They're jerks," she muttered. "Come sit with me and my friends. Safety in numbers and all that." Ethan nodded, gratefully following her to a table in the corner where 2 other students sat. They introduced themselves as Lily and Devin, fellow outcasts in the Westlake social hierarchy. For the rest of lunch, they filled Ethan in on the school's dynamics, which teachers actually cared, which hallways to avoid, and most importantly, how Jackson's crew operated. "They're worst in the gym," Devin explained, pushing his glasses up nervously. "Coach Turner basically lets them do whatever they want because Jackson's dad threatened to pull funding if his son didn't get special treatment." Ethan nodded, mentally, adding gym class to his list of potential danger zones. The next 2 weeks fell into a pattern. Jackson, Drew, and Marcus would find ways to torment Ethan daily, shoving him into lockers in the hallway, knocking books from his hands, tripping him in the cafeteria, and making loud comments about his clothes, his glasses, his size. Each time, Ethan would simply pick himself up, straighten his glasses, and walk away. In the bathroom, they cornered him and gave him a swirly, dunking his head in a toilet, while Marcus stood guard at the door. In the locker room before gym, they stole his clothes, forcing him to wear his gym uniform for the rest of the day. They created a nickname for him, Squeaky, because of his supposedly high-pitched voice when he was nervous. Through it all, Ethan maintained his composure, though each night when he got home he would spend hours at his father's small home gym, pounding the heavy bag until his knuckles were raw. His father noticed, of course. "Something going on at school I should know about?" Richard Morgan asked one evening, holding the bag steady as Ethan unleashed a flurry of perfectly executed combinations. "Nothing I can't handle," Ethan replied between breaths. His father studied him for a long moment. "Remember what I taught you about fighting? Only as a last resort," Ethan recited. "Never throw the first punch, but always throw the last. And my training isn't for showing off or intimidating others." His father nodded. "You've got power in those hands, son. Real power. That means you've got a responsibility to use it wisely." Ethan hit the bag harder. "I know, Dad." At school, he continued to endure the daily torment, finding small comfort in his growing friendship with Zoe, Lily, and Devin. They were outcasts too. Zoe for her alternative style, Lily for being openly gay, and Devin for being, as he put it, a chess club nerd in a football school. They provided Ethan with a safe haven at lunch and between classes. 3 weeks into his time at Westlake, the situation escalated dramatically. Ethan was in the hallway after final bell, gathering books from his locker, when he heard a commotion around the corner. Following the sound, he found Jackson and his crew surrounding Devin, who was pressed against the wall, his chess club materials scattered across the floor. "Please," Devin was saying, his voice trembling. "That's a tournament set. It was expensive. Should have thought about that before you made me look stupid in Mr. Garrett's class," Jackson said, grinding his heel into a white bishop. Ethan felt something shift inside him. Watching them target Devin, who had been nothing but kind to him, sparked a protective instinct he couldn't ignore. He stepped forward. "Leave him alone," Ethan said, his voice steadier than it had ever been at Westlake. Jackson turned, surprise registering briefly before his smirk returned. "Well, if it isn't Squeaky growing a backbone, this doesn't concern you," I said. "Leave him alone." Ethan moved closer, positioning himself between Jackson and Devin. Marcus stepped forward. "You hear this, Jackson? Squeaky thinks he can tell us what to do," Drew laughed. "Maybe he needs another swirly to remind him how things work around here." Jackson studied Ethan for a moment, then nodded to his friends. "Bathroom now." Before they could grab him, Ethan helped Devin gather his chess pieces. "Go find Zoe and Lily," he whispered. "I'll be fine." Devin hesitated, clearly torn between staying to help and running for safety. "Ethan, go," Ethan insisted, pressing the chess set into Devin's hands. Once Devin had hurried away, Ethan turned to face Jackson and his crew. 3 against 1 seems fair," he said dryly. "Oh, he's got jokes now," Drew said, grabbing Ethan's arm. "Let's see how funny you are with your head in the toilet." They manhandled him toward the boys' bathroom, Ethan offering just enough resistance to make it believable without revealing his true abilities. Once inside, Marcus checked the stalls to ensure they were alone, while Drew kept watch at the door. "You know, Squeaky," Jackson said, pushing Ethan toward the last stall, "I was starting to think you were smarter than this. All you had to do was keep your head down and take it, but now you had to play hero." Ethan steadied himself, assessing the situation. 3 opponents, confined space, multiple hard surfaces. Not ideal, but manageable. Still, he thought, One last chance for a peaceful solution. This isn't going to go how you think it will, Ethan warned, his voice calm. Jackson laughed. Listen to him. Squeaky's threatening us now. He shoved Ethan hard against the stall door. Let me explain how this works, fresh meat. You don't tell us what to do. You don't stand up for chess nerds. You take what we give you and thank us for the attention. So much for the peaceful approach, Ethan thought. Hold him, Jackson ordered, and Marcus grabbed Ethan from behind, locking his thick arms around Ethan's chest. It was the last mistake Marcus would make that day. In one fluid motion, the result of thousands of hours of training, Ethan dropped. His weight creating space, then twisted sharply, breaking Marcus's grip. Before anyone could register what was happening, Ethan had slipped behind Marcus and used the larger boy's momentum to send him stumbling forward, face first into the bathroom wall. What the... Drew started, but he never finished the sentence. Ethan moved with a speed and precision that left them stunned. He wasn't the scrawny, helpless target they'd been tormenting for weeks. His movements were calculated, efficient, and devastatingly effective. A right hook caught Drew in the solar plexus, doubling him over, followed by a quick sweep that took his legs out from under him. Jackson stood frozen, watching his friends go down in seconds. His shock quickly turned to rage, and he charged Ethan. With a wild haymaker, Ethan stepped inside the punch, deflecting it with a practiced move, then delivered an open palm strike to Jackson's sternum that drove the air from his lungs and sent him staggering backward. What the hell are you? Jackson wheezed, clutching his chest. Ethan straightened his glasses. Someone who asked to be left alone. Marcus had recovered enough to try another attack, lunging at Ethan from the side. This time Ethan didn't hold back. A combination of strikes, jab, cross, hook, left Marcus dazed against the sinks. Drew attempted to grab Ethan from behind, but a reverse elbow to the ribs followed by a hip toss left him sprawled on the bathroom floor. Jackson made one last desperate attempt, pulling himself up and swinging wildly. Ethan slipped the punch and countered with a perfectly placed right cross that connected with Jackson's jaw, sending him crashing into the paper towel dispenser before sliding to the floor. The bathroom fell silent, except for the groans of the three bullies and the steady drip from a leaky faucet. Ethan stood unharmed in the center, his breathing only slightly elevated. 9 years of mixed martial arts, he said quietly. My dad was a professional fighter. I've been training since I was 6. He looked at each of them in turn. I never wanted this. All I asked was to be left alone. He turned to leave, then paused at the door. And if I ever see you bothering Devin or Zoe or Lily or anyone else again, this will seem like a warm-up. Understood? 3 pained nods answered him. Word spread through Westlake High like wildfire. By the following morning, everyone had heard some version of how the quiet new kid had taken down Jackson and his crew. The stories grew more elaborate with each telling. Some claimed Ethan had knocked out all 3 with a single punch. Others said he'd used secret martial arts moves that had left them paralyzed for hours. The reality was less dramatic, but no less impactful. Jackson sported a bruised jaw. Drew walked with a noticeable limp, and Marcus winced every time he had to raise his arms. More significantly, they gave Ethan a wide berth in the hallways, their eyes downcast whenever he passed. In the cafeteria, Ethan was surprised to find that his usual corner table with Zoe, Lily, and Devin had attracted new people, students who had previously been too afraid to associate with the outcasts for fear of drawing Jackson's attention. You're like a celebrity now, Zoe said, making room for him. The guy who stood up to Jackson Ward and lived to tell the tale. Devin couldn't stop grinning. You should have seen their faces when they came out of that bathroom. It was like they'd seen a ghost. I didn't want it to be like this, Ethan said quietly. Fighting wasn't my first choice. Maybe not, Lily said, but you did what no one else had the courage to do. You showed them they're not untouchable. The dynamics at Westlake shifted subtly but definitively in the weeks that followed. Jackson and his crew still strutted through the hallways, but their reign of terror had ended. They focused their energy on football and left the fresh meat alone. More importantly, the teachers who had turned a blind eye before were suddenly more vigilant, perhaps fearing that if Jackson's crew could fall, the school's entire social order might be questioned. For Ethan, the change was both welcome and uncomfortable. He didn't want to be known as the fighter or the kid who beat up Jackson. He just wanted to be Ethan, a normal kid trying to get through high school. Gradually, as the gossip died down, he found a new normal. His friendship circle expanded. He joined the physics club with Devin, and he even started helping Zoe with a campaign to address bullying at Westlake. One afternoon, about a month after the bathroom incident, Ethan was surprised to find Jackson waiting by his locker after school. Instinctively, he tensed, preparing for a confrontation. Jackson raised his hands in a gesture of peace. "Not looking for round two," he said quickly. "Just wanted to talk." Ethan remained cautious but nodded for him to continue. "My dad saw the bruises," Jackson said, rubbing his jaw at the memory. "Wanted to know what happened. I could have made up some story, but," he shrugged. "I told him the truth about everything, the bullying, the swirlies, all of it." "And?" Ethan prompted when Jackson fell silent, "and he hit the roof. Not at you, at me. Said he didn't raise me to be a bully, that he was ashamed." Jackson looked genuinely uncomfortable. "He's making me see a counselor now, and he said if he hears about me bothering anyone else, he'll pull me from the football team." Ethan wasn't sure how to respond. This vulnerable version of Jackson was a stark contrast to the tormentor he'd known. "Anyway," Jackson continued, "I'm not asking you to forgive me or anything, just wanted you to know that I get it now. What we did was messed up, and," he hesitated, "I'm sorry." "I appreciate that," Ethan said finally. "Everyone deserves a second chance, I guess." Jackson nodded, then turned to go, pausing one last time. "You know, you could join the MMA club. Coach Stevens is always looking for new members, and after what you did to us, well, you'd probably wipe the floor with everyone." Ethan smiled slightly. "I'll think about it." As Jackson walked away, Ethan felt a weight lift from his shoulders. He hadn't come to Westlake looking for trouble, or looking to teach anyone a lesson. He'd just wanted to get through school peacefully. In the end, he'd had to fight, but more importantly, he'd managed to do so without losing himself in the process. When he got home that day, his father was waiting in the kitchen. "Principal called," Richard said, crossing his arms. "Said there was an incident." Ethan nodded, bracing himself for disappointment. "Said you stood up to some bullies, defended a friend." "It was a last resort, Dad, I swear." His father's stern expression softened. "I know, son. You held out longer than most would have." He placed a hand on Ethan's shoulder. "I didn't teach you to fight so you could bully others or show off. I taught you so you'd never have to be afraid, so you could protect yourself and others if necessary." "I'm not suspended or anything," Ethan clarified. "The other guys wouldn't admit what happened, and there weren't any witnesses in the bathroom." Richard nodded. "The principal also mentioned you're helping start some anti-bullying program now." Ethan shrugged. "Zoe's idea, really. But yeah, I'm helping. Figure if I can use what happened to make things better, it wasn't all bad." His father smiled, genuine pride in his eyes. "That's my boy. Fighting is easy. Making peace, that takes real strength." Later that evening, as Ethan worked on his physics homework, his phone buzzed with a message from Zoe. "Committee meeting tomorrow at lunch. Principal approved our anti-bullying proposal. You in?" Ethan smiled as he typed his reply. "Definitely in." In the months that followed, Westlake High School saw changes that went beyond the fall of Jackson's crew. The anti-bullying committee, led by former outcasts, implemented peer mediation programs and created safe spaces for students who felt marginalized. Even more surprisingly, Jackson eventually joined their efforts, bringing several of his teammates with him. For Ethan, the experience taught him something his father had tried to instill through years of training. True strength wasn't about physical power or the ability to dominate others. It was about knowing when to use your capabilities and when to show restraint, about standing up not just for yourself, but for others, and about finding the courage to change a broken system rather than simply surviving within it. By the end of his sophomore year, Ethan had found his place at Westlake. He was no longer defined as the new kid, or the quiet one, or even the one who had taken down Jackson Ward. He was just Ethan Morgan, student, friend, occasionally reluctant hero, figuring out high school one day at a time, like everyone else, and if some of the younger students looked at him with a bit of awe, or if the hallways parted slightly when he walked through, well, that wasn't entirely a bad thing. After all, sometimes the most effective deterrent to a bully wasn't a fist, it was the knowledge that somewhere someone was willing to stand up and say enough.